welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of the book Flipping the Iceberg, no other than Miss Charisse Walker. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Charisse, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
I would love to. Thank you so much for letting me be on. So my name is Charisse Walker, and I wrote the book Flipping the Iceberg. And the reason for that is because I am on a mission to empower couples, divorced people, and people contemplating getting married. And so there's two secrets you need to know before you say I do.
Yes.
All it is about.
Yes. Definitely. So, Miss Charisse, what does the metaphor of flipping the iceberg represent in terms of self awareness?
Well, I think if, especially in our culture, when you say, "Hey, how are you?" and they say, "Good, how are you?" and it's just this automatic thing, and people usually really aren't just good. And so, because of that, I've realized that we tend to put on a facade. In addition to that, you have people who have these traumas in their life that sometimes they are aware of, other times they're not, and it affects their relationship. And so they're just like little icebergs floating and ready to take down the ship. And so that iceberg, 10% you see above the water, 90% you see below. So if you can flip that iceberg, then you can deal with your trauma before you get into relationship, as well as you need to get to know the other person. And I think a lot of times we spend more time planning a wedding than we actually do the marriage because we're afraid to have those hard conversations. So
True.
that's what the book is about, is getting those hard conversations over before you say I do.
Yes, Miss Charisse Walker, thank you so much for sharing Flipping the Iceberg. For sure, lots of people will empower for this book. How does the book define self awareness and why is it important in personal growth?
Well, good question. The self awareness part is flipping is actually an acronym. So you first have to find the trauma in your relationship, and then it goes on from there. And so I don't want to spoil it too much because it really does stand for an acronym. But a lot of times we get into our own head, or we tend to believe the narrative that people have said about us, and sometimes it's just not true. So you start to understand your potential. You start to figure out, where do I want to be in life? What do I want to do? And then following your intuition. How many times have you gone out with somebody, or you plan to, and you, like, this little thing inside of you just tells you don't do that, and you do it anyway, and you're like, I understand why I shouldn't have done that. And so learning how to get our intuition, even dealing with abusive relationships, identifying what an abusive relationship is, identifying if you are part of a cohabitation, like not cohabitation, a codependent person. And so you have to have somebody around you instead of being okay on your own. And so you tend to get into more abusive or negative toxic relationships because you're codependent. And so also learning how to give yourself grace, forgive yourself for things that you've done in the past. Like, it's okay, we're human, we make mistakes, but you don't have to dwell on that, and you don't have to think that you deserve somebody to settle for somebody versus, hey, I need someone that brings me up. So that's the first part of the book, and that's what we go through. Is it's a workbook as well that it accompanies the book. And so it's kind of like a journal. You can write your thoughts down, you can go through the exercises, and really get you thinking about things and trying to heal so that you can make healthy decisions.
Yes, heal first, people.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
what role does emotional intelligence play in navigating relationships and with confidence?
Yeah. So emotional intelligence is one of those things that sometimes we just don't understand, or we don't realize where we're at on this. I call it kind of a spectrum. And so if we can understand where we are with our emotional intelligence, that we can make more mature choices. Because sometimes have you ever known somebody, or someone ever said to you, hey, you're not ready, or you're not mature enough, or something like that, or you feel like you are but you really aren't? And so it's understanding, like, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so we talk about that, and there's 5 levels, and you want to get to self actualization. And so It really is trying to hone in and making sure that you've healed from some of these things that, triggers that you might not have recognized. And now you're like, oh, like for me, I didn't realize things that happened in my childhood really affected my first marriage and relationship. And although I'm not going to blame it only on that, that's why they have the second half of the book. But I wish that I would have been more healed and more aware of those things so I could have dealt with them better.
So let's talk about personal growth and transformation. How can understanding your own emotions lead to better interactions with others?
Great question. So I used to be one of those people that I was a people pleaser. I wanted to always make somebody happy, and I was afraid because I didn't have a very high self esteem that I was constantly bending over backwards and being taken for granted a lot because I was so desirous to have somebody accept me for who I am, or different things. And it wasn't until I lived in a neighborhood that some of the women in that little neighborhood were not the nicest of people, and I found myself again still bending over backwards. And when I moved away, like, it was this layer of onion that was peeled off for me, or as I said, for me it's the flipping of the iceberg, because I realized, wait a second, I need to love myself first. And loving yourself means putting boundaries on people. And quite frankly, if you like me or if you don't like me, that's on you. I can't do anything to help that, but I also am not going to give up who I am. And so for me, it really was a journey of transformation, because I realized I don't have to, not everyone's going to like you, and there's nothing you can do about that. But if you give up your true core values and yourself for someone just for acceptance, then that is really a huge red flag that you definitely have some work to do. And so for me, I realized that it was okay. Like, I need to love myself for who I am and accept myself for who I am. And if I have things I need to improve on, because we all do, then absolutely I'm going to. But the other things, that's more of other people and their insecurities, and not really being able to deal with stuff that they're going to judge you and make you feel, that's what bullies do. They're not happy with themselves. And so they put other people down.
Yes, that's true. Let it go, people, and live it at the present. So,
Yep.
what are the some of the common challenges people face when trying to become a more self-aware?
Well, you always have that little imposter syndrome, right? That I you have, it's a Cherokee fable that basically you have a Cherokee grandfather who was walking down the street with his grandson, and he's like, there's two wars that are happening in this world. You have the good wolf and you have the bad wolf. And the good wolf says that you're wonderful, you're lovable, you're smart, you're intelligent, you're handsome, or you're pretty, or like they just make you feel really, really good. But then you have this bad wolf that says you're ugly, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're just dumb, and nobody's ever going to listen to you, nobody's ever going to want you. And so there's this negative bad wolf. And so the grandson says, well, grandpa, which one wins? And the grandpa says, the one that you feed the most. And so with that, if you think about it, it really is it's somebody who, you have to constantly tell yourself that, I think it's just Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live. You're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh golly, people like you. But our brain doesn't understand. Like, our brain really doesn't understand the difference between the good or the bad. It doesn't like it. You have to tell it things, and then it will believe what you say. So if you say I'm not good enough, if you say I'm not smart enough, if you say I don't deserve this, you're going to believe that. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you can, like, flip the switch, and I call it the has method. So you halt when you start to have a negative comment, then you acknowledge what that feeling is, and then you shift. Um, then you can actually shift to a more positive saying and start to believe that. And so that's where it really does help you.
So, Miss Cherries, let's talk about relationship dynamics and communication. How does the book address the issue of people pleasing and its effect on relationships?
So the people pleasing, again, I kind of already touched on that, but it really, like with communication, you have to be willing to have those hard conversations, especially before you get married. And so, like, how are we going to discipline the kids? How are we going to handle our finances? How are we going to handle our in-laws? Like, come on. Sometimes that can be really difficult. Like,
Yes.
I know some people that one person always wants to spend all their time with their family, and then the other one's like, "Well, can we ever take a family vacation without?" your family. And so it's a really big issue. And so if you're this people pleaser all the time, you got to think of it like a bucket. You're always putting things in this bucket, right? And you don't say anything, you just put it in the bucket, put it in the bucket, or the gunny sack. It's called gunny sacking. And so eventually that gunny sack or that bucket's going to fill up and it's going to explode. And so you could end up exploding over the minorest little things. And someone on the outside's like, what is your problem? And it has nothing to do with what just happened that moment. It has everything to do with like a combination of, it could be months, it could be years, it could be weeks of just frustrations. And so if you constantly become this peacemaker or somebody that's like trying to not ever rock the boat, eventually it's going to implode. Like that iceberg is going to tear into your relationship.
Certainly. So, how can self awareness improve the way we respond to difficult people or situations?
Yeah, the easiest thing with that, self-awareness and responding to negative people, is when you feel happy with yourself, when you're comfortable with yourself, when you love yourself, it doesn't matter what other people think. And I'm not saying that in a rude way, like, well, I don't care, because sometimes the feedback is valuable. What I'm talking about is those toxic relationships where they try to control you, they try to make you feel like you are that person that constantly it's your fault and it's your doing. If you are self-aware, you can finally step back. And this happened to me in an abusive relationship. I can step back and say, you know what, I don't believe what you're saying anymore, and that's not true. And so you can walk away, you can exit the relationship, you can do lots of things, but you no longer have to believe that person. You're going to flip your iceberg and say, no, that's not true. You're entitled to your feelings, but I know for me that that is not true.
Yes, indeed. As I always saying, don't care what people say about you because they don't want you to only to fail, not
Yep,
to succeed.
it is so true. Yep.
So, Miss Charisse, what will be your advice for those people out there who want to get out to their toxic relationship?
Well, this is a hard one because it really does depend. A toxic relationship means different things to every single person. So if you are in, like, it's really easy if you're being hit by somebody, it's really easy to say, okay, yes, I'm being abused. But there are so many different types of abuse. There's financial, there's physical, there's emotional, mental. And so just because somebody might not be hitting you on the outside, they could be hitting you emotionally, they could be hitting you financially. And so you have to stop and think, is this abuse? And so actually, like, I don't really mean to refer to the book, but there is, especially in the workbook, there is a long list of yes and no questions that you can ask yourself that you might not be aware that you're in that. And so if you can like answer honestly with those questions, you'll be able to identify yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And then we need to figure out the next steps. And so, I mean, obviously, there's lots of help out there. You could reach out to me as well, where we can get you some help to be able to exit the relationship, especially if your life is in danger, quite frankly. If it's just minor stuff, now you need to deal with a whole lot of other personal things that you're going to end up going through, and you're going to start to justify, oh, you know what, it was me, or it wasn't them, I did something, it's my fault, if I would have just not done blah, then they wouldn't have, and that's a huge sign of abuse. And so with that, sometimes people can quickly leave, sometimes you have to make a plan, sometimes it really does depend on the type of abuse that you're dealing with. But the big thing is you don't deserve it, it's not okay, and you get help.
Yes. People, if you need help, please do ask for help.
Mhm.
And what would be your short term and long term goals in writing?
So my short term was to get that book out, but
Yes.
what I didn't realize, and here's a little tidbit: if you're thinking about writing a book, I wish that my coaches would have said to me, "Okay, we need to get a whole bunch of reviews. We need to start doing some marketing. Like you should be doing 3 to 6 months worth of marketing before you publish." And I didn't. I finished the book and it was published. So then I didn't market it because I was working on this workbook. And so the workbook is done, just some finishing touches with editors and um, designers. But then the next one is I'm writing a book, Flipping the Iceberg After the I Do. And that's for people who are married. And it's going to go in a whole bunch of different ranges from the time that they are just newly married, newlyweds, to I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to say nearly dead. So they've been married for a long time. Because believe it or not, the number one age group getting divorced right now are 65 and older. So why? You've lived with each other for 40 years. 50 years. Like, what in the heck? So, can we save those marriages and by just reconnecting with each other? And so, it's a book about that. And then the third book on the trilogy, I guess I'll call it, is Flipping the Iceberg. How to hire people in business. So those are the three, my long term. There's some other books that are coming out about relationships in real estate, since real estate is really something that I am very experienced in. And so just trying to help people, because it's hard. It's a hard time right now. And we need people who are champions and that encourage us, not that bring us down.
Definitely. Good luck to your goals, Miss Charis, and thank you for your advice. And we are looking forward for more and more and more empowering books like this. So let's talk about the practical applications and exercises of flipping the iceberg. Are there any self-reflection exercises or techniques in the book to develop self-awareness?
Yes, there are a ton. And that's why the workbook's taken me so long, because I probably had 30 questions to 60 questions for each chapter. And I realized that I would overwhelm people. So I'm not going to, like, I'm going to cut it down for a book version, but I'm going to also have an ebook version that is way lengthier for people that really want to take it serious. And so every single chapter is going to have self reflection questions. And so, just spoiler alert, the first chapter would be, like I said, finding your icebergs. So that's what the F stands for. And so you need to, like, for me, a good example was I tended to be very, very um, like I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't really care about that, or I didn't feel like I could trust them, because back in sixth grade, I walked up to these two people, which I used to have like really good friends in fifth grade. In sixth grade, two of these people I walked up to at recess and said, "Hey, you want to play?" And they just looked at me and they laughed and just said no. And I went, oh my gosh, right? And so from then on, I can remember not feeling like I had a lot of friends. I had close ones, but not a lot of them, because I didn't trust people. And so that was something where I had to get over. Like, a stupid little thing like that that happened on the playground had such a profound effect on my life. And so finding your icebergs and understanding them and how they've affected your life, so that's a huge self-reflection. That's one of the biggest ones we start with. And then, like, chapter 2 is limiting beliefs, talking about what do we believe about ourselves, how do we go, and trusting your intuition, developing your potential, overcoming the pressure of your culture, your family, anybody like that. And so it continues along a path. And so it's tons of questions, yes or no, some short answers, and then at the end of it, we have what's called iceberg insights, where now you're going to write about those insights. What have you taken away from the chapter? What can you change? What can you improve? And what do you like? And so, yeah, we talk a lot about every single chapter has activities.
Yes, indeed. And let it go, people. Let it go and live on the present, at the moment. So, what actionable steps does the book suggest for transforming self doubt into self confidence?
Yeah, so that's the has method as well that we talked about. That if you start to believe something negative about yourself, I really want you to take a minute and say, okay, like I used to do this all the time. And it really was life changing. I did it. I hired a coach, and she uses the stop, snap, and switch method, which she also has a book about. But it's Krista May Shore, if you want to know. But I kind of changed it to the has, because I want you to think about, what do you have and what do we like, what are our blessings in life, and we can focus on having things rather than not having things. And so that's why I developed has method. And so if you can really like halt and acknowledge those feelings, acknowledge those things, and then really turn them around and make sure that we say positive stuff and focus on the positive. And pretty soon, because I used to be a really negative person, like super negative, you can ask me, ask a lot of people. And what I mean by that, I was so insecure about myself that I would self deprecate myself, and then I would criticize other people to make myself feel better. And that is not a healthy way of thinking at all. And you're not happy when you do that. I can attest to that, because I was like that. So if we can acknowledge ourselves and learn to love ourselves, then it really does make a difference.
Yes. Love yourself, people. Love yourself. So, how can reader use the insight from the book to build stronger, more authentic connections?
You said it earlier, communication. So you have to learn how to communicate. And so I have somebody that they like to yell a lot, and um, I finally, it was a little while ago, I sent something about yelling and how that does, it just turns people off. And there's no productive communication that can happen when somebody's just yelling and attacking. And so um, you owe it to yourself to turn around and walk away. Right. So that's something that the other person's going to be like, how dare you? You're so rude. I can't believe you're doing that. And it's like, well, how dare you? You don't need to sit there and attack and yell and do the different things. And so the first time I actually encouraged somebody to just walk away, that was very
Yes.
interesting to see that the person yelling really blew up. And so, because of that, I think it is communication and learning how to communicate in a non judgmental, non attacking way and have true dialogue. And so, that's where the second half of the book comes in, where it is true dialogue. I do this with my husband right now, but it's yes and no questions. And so, it's either a yes or it's a no. That's it. And your perception of what's happening and their perception of what's happening could be very different things, but that creates a dialogue that we can then talk from.
Yes. Yes or no. Leave it or take it.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up our discussion, Mr. Reese, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season. People, fifth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in the oh, sorry, in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letters senders all over the world. So please do listen. Food 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Cherise, what is the biggest takeaway from flipping the iceberg?
I want you to know that you matter and that you have worth and you have so much going for you. Your potential is unlimited. And I do believe that we're all put on this earth for a reason. And we need to identify that reason and embrace that and move forward because you deserve to have a healthy, a happy, and a lasting relationship. And so, if this book can help do that by taking you through a series of things that you might not have ever thought about, or maybe you were aware and you're like, I've heard this before, but it's all in a combination into a book that you can truly heal yourself and then uncover your partner's icebergs and climb to the summit together. And it would be so much better. And my dream is that you go walking down the aisle or however you get married and you can look in each other's eyes and truly know each other, and you're going to have a healthy and happy relationship. So that is my hope, and that is my purpose for writing the book.
Miss Charisse Walker, thank you so much for sharing your empowering book to the world. We are looking forward for more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yes, please, please, please. It's flippingtheiceberg.com. Or you're welcome to go to CharisseWalker.com. CharissesseWalker.
Yes, wherever you books are sold, I think.
Yep.
Yes, it's
Amazon.
available.
Yeah, sorry.
Good, I think. Barnes and Nobles, people where books are sold. Please support me, Charisse Walker, because if you support her, as I said, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Miss Charisse, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.